This is our October 2nd, 2024 work session for the Douglas County Commission. During this time, we will hear about the Heritage Conservation Council and get an update on their work. During our work sessions, we ask questions and get feedback, but we do not have public comment during this time. We also do not take any votes or make any decisions during a work session also. But if anyone is interested and hears something that they'd like to respond to, you're certainly welcome to always email us, and you can make public comment at our 5:30 business meeting. So with that, we have some of our partners here with us, and I will turn it to Caitlin Amerlin if you would like to introduce who you have here.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Caitlin Amerlin, the Heritage Conservation Coordinator for Douglas County, and I'm joined today by Patty Beatles, the Vice Chair of the Heritage Conservation Council, and Nick Pumphrey, the current Chair of the Heritage Conservation Council, and we're here to share an update with you all. I don't know if you both want to introduce yourselves while I get the PowerPoint up and running, and yeah, then we'll go from there.
Yeah, my name's Patty Beatles, she, her, and I work for the Kansas Land Trust. I've been on the Heritage Conservation Council since 2021, and so really glad to be here.
Yep, my name's Nick Pumphrey. I work at Baker University. I'm the religious studies professor there. I'm also an archaeologist. And honestly, I don't know how long I've been on the council. I think around the same time, 2022 maybe is when I started. 23, I don't know. Close to it.
Alrighty, so we're gonna just jump right on in here. Generally, kind of what we're gonna work or kind of run through today, starting with talking about some of the past successes of HCC and moving through kind of where we are today in the evolution of the kind of projects we're taking on, and to share those projects with you all and get your feedback on sort of our current direction and the implementation of our current strategic plan. So just as broader context for what the Heritage Conservation Council is and how it was established, it was created alongside of the Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program in 2011, and that was following a report from a task force, which is a citizen-led task force, to determine how the county can best support natural and cultural heritage projects, and that report found that that a grant program to support community-led projects would probably be a great way to start that. And I think since 2011, it's evolved and taken shape and grown since then, but that was really the foundation that led to where we are today. Another big piece of that that was recommended by the task force was to seek certified local government status, and that is a National Park Service program through the State Historic Preservation Office that empowers communities to lead historic preservation efforts at the local level. So we've maintained that and several things that have impacted HCC's work. And essentially that status allows us to seek grants through the State Historic Preservation Office to do work here in the community. But that was foundational to sort of setting up HCC's direction. And then rolling through our mission, I think the primary goal of the Heritage Conservation Council, HCC, is to promote and advocate for the conservation of both tangible and intangible natural and cultural heritage in the county. So this, I think that can be very broad, and I think HCC has really embraced that, especially recently, of having that holistic view of heritage and what that means, and what that support looks like, kind of moves through time. And this mission was updated slightly with the strategic plan. So it's a bit of an updated mission statement. And so the composition of HCC, it's a 7-member advisory board. And so these are commissioner appointed seats. And with the certified local government status, one rule of that is 3 of 7, a certain percentage of the commissioners have to be preservation professionals, so to have that professional expertise on the council. So that includes architects, historians, archaeologists. It's a list, and that's based on that certified local government designation. And there's a list of our current members, and we do currently have 1 vacancy on the council, so we're actively seeking a community member, particularly with a background in cultural heritage, that might be interested in that vacant seat. But yeah, so that's kind of the sort of background of the council itself. And this is sort of a layout of what the council's projects were kind of up to 2023. So HCC has taken on a lot of different types of work, and it was really centered around kind of three primary areas, breaking it down of sort of the funding support. So like I mentioned before, really the foundational bit with the grant program that has always been foundational to HCC's work. Second being the historic resource preservation, so that certified local government piece has really been beneficial in leveraging those federal dollars to the community, and that has supported a lot of historic preservation work through a really unique amount of countywide surveys. So we've surveyed all of the unincorporated areas of Douglas County for historic resources, and so we've gotten a lot of data through that. That led us to the Rural Historic Resources Guide and sort of compiling all that data. Additionally, we had supported for several years a barn assessment program to help folks better understand their historic barns and set a preservation pathway there. So that was a big foundation of HCC's work in the past. And then also had a strong public outreach component and a lot of like doing type of work. So putting on a preservation conference that was 2 years in a row, in addition to supporting landmark tours. So kind of producing content, through HCC itself. And then there's a lot more beyond that too. It's hard to put everything on one slide, of course, but I know there's been a lot of work with historic cemeteries that was done too, and sort of compiling that data, doing some cemetery preservation workshops, things like that. So it's expansive beyond here, but just to kind of generally kind of group the support in the past. Anything I'm missing or kind of from there? Okay. So that's kind of the foundation that was laid. And then in late 2022, HCC with a new staff, with staff turnover and sort of fresh eyes on the program. And I think HCC had some fairly big turnover around this time too of just the composition of the council. Underwent a new strategic planning process, and this is the first time since the task force report and the start of the council that there was a strategic plan built just for HCC, and this has kind of guided our work now into the future. Generally, we have our 4 goals up there, but generally we've kind of transitioned more from doing the work ourselves to being primarily a supporter of this work, and uplifting, organizations in the community doing this work and finding how we can best support and kind of convene partners in this space. I think that's the role that HCC has really slid into. I was not a part of the strategic planning process, but Patty or Nick, if you have anything to add on just what that process looked like and kind of how we got to where this is.
Yeah, so Nick and I both were part of that strategic planning, and it was a great experience. I think the council as a whole felt as though it was important that we come up with ways that we're most efficiently using our skill sets. And so rather than focusing on the doing, we got together for an all-day strategic planning event at the winter school and just dove in kind of headfirst into how do we utilize funds to our best capacity and, also our skill sets. And so it was a great experience, I think, working on that strategic plan. And there was some tweaking, I think, after our day together, but I think it was really productive. And this kind of encompasses our work, kind of redirecting the next steps for the council.
Yeah, and I can, echoing what Patty said, one of the things that started feeling, I think, from 3 coordinators, which we were on our second one at that point, felt like we had added a bunch of things and we sort of lost what we were supposed to be doing and what we were supposed to prioritize. So I think this helped immensely sort of get us where we were supposed to be going, what were we supposed to prioritize. what were we supposed to work on, that kind of thing. And I can tell, personally, I appreciate especially the second part of this, the number 2 up there is the advising part. We had already started doing that, but there really wasn't anything in our sort of charter or what we were supposed to do with this. So it was already adding on. And so it felt like making it a part of the actual strategic plan felt like it was a mission that we were going to do sort of this. And to me, it's one of the more rewarding things that we do.
Can I ask about the advising part? So I know you're also an advisory board to us, but are folks seeking you out to ask questions about how to preserve private property or listed properties? Can you talk more about that advising role?
Well, for me, from the archaeology side, for the most part, it has been zoning and public works and that kind of side of things. We have had in the past, or I have had in the past, public reach out, and immediately I go, Caitlin, can I answer these questions? Because some of that, especially from the archaeology side, is private, or not private, but not accessible to the public. So I do offer advice to some people if they're a private landowner and I can talk about their property. But from the point of view of like someone else's property, or, is someone trying to build something across the road and they want to know if there's archaeological artifacts, I can't advise them on things like that.
And from the historic resource perspective, I do field inquiries from the public, often asking, where can they seek resources? And so connecting in that way is definitely something that I do in my role. I know, for instance, I think I'm attending a meeting this weekend with a church interested in seeking options on their property. So just providing that information as best we can. So that's really where I see our role here in connecting folks to the resources, but yeah, in a way that's helpful to the community. And especially because we have all that data now, I feel like it's a real treat to be able to use it, for that church in particular. Like, we have a full listing that's really detailed because of that survey work. So getting to put that to use honestly feels really powerful, because it's that data and that information is really unique. So when I have an opportunity to use it, I think it's super cool. Alrighty, so now we're jumping into today and sort of where we're headed over the next year. I believe the last time that HCC provided an update to the County Commission was right before I started, so kind of introducing the strategic plan. So this is our first major update since then, and just wanted to run through our kind of current projects, a few new ones that we'd love your input on as we kind of continue forward. So yeah, and so I think just generally, I think these projects and how it's laid out is quite reflective of that strategic plan. So stepping back a bit from the doing, and again, more in that planning and collaboration space, and really leaning into the sort of funding support piece, and anchoring in the grant program and the strength there, and understanding how we can continue some of that work in the future. I still have public outreach there a bit, in a way that we connect with the public, and in a way that might not take as much time and be as time intensive as some of those other projects in the past, but still keeping that piece in there as we move forward. So yes, we'll kind of walk through our sort of current projects here and kind of where we're headed. So of course, the Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program, I think this is a really awesome program. It's incredibly unique and has supported, just right there, 124 projects. And so this is a really, I mean, I think it's my job to think it's wonderful, but I truly do believe in this program, and I think it's a really neat way to get pretty low barrier funding to projects that would not be funded otherwise. So there's been some really great work done. And so a big part of that, I really wanted to help share the success of this program. So we have developed a a story map in partnership with the GIS department here at the county. Helen Bontrager in particular was super helpful and made this dream come to life. And so now we have an online map where you can see a listing of all those projects that have been funded and kind of see their distribution throughout the county and learn a bit more about the work that's been done. So I think this is a neat program. We did a lot of work at the end of last year to help simplify the program a bit. We did an equity assessment to help inform some revisions to the program and again, just help simplify it and streamline it a bit. And I think that was pretty successful. We just had 1 year, so I'd be curious going into this next grant cycle too to see the impact of that work. But yeah, and then we also helped facilitate open space grants as well. So last year we actually had double the funding pool because of that open space grant program. So HCC's really helped put in a lot of work in that. And if either of you have anything to add about the grant program?
I just want to say one of the great things about having a map, I'm a visual person. I sometimes teach GIS, so I love maps. But it really shows how we need to do some more public outreach to the western side of our county. And let people know that this opportunity is out there for them to do projects. Because we really have a heavy sort of eastern from Baldwin to Lawrence, sort of a lot of dots there, but we don't have much on the western side of county.
And what are the outreach methods? Specifically for the grant program, I should say.
So currently, we have a big old email list that we kind of send the grant notification out to, and that reaches a whole bunch of people. And then we host an informational session that we try to get out through our different channels to let folks know. So we do have a time for folks to come in person and chat with us and learn more about the grant program. But I think we can continue to expand that outreach, especially reaching out to maybe local groups directly in that area. But that's always, I think we could always just do a little bit more. And I think this program in particular has a really strong word of mouth sort of energy that's taken on to it, and it's grown through that. As more projects get done, more people get to know about it.
I do think it's pretty well known, especially among the folks who would be interested in this. But I also wonder about like the cemetery districts, which pretty much only exist on the west, and they're all elected officials that run those. If that's an outreach method that's been used or could be more used, or maybe even getting cemetery district board members together to share some of their own resources and thoughts. Because I know we have a lot of cemeteries that, even though they are geographically within a cemetery district, are not part of the charter for that group. So they really don't many of those cemeteries aren't tax supported. And there's a lot of good history there that right now nobody's putting that love and time into.
I think our dot in the south sort of central part is actually a cemetery grant, and it's new. So I think hopefully that'll start spreading some of the word with the cemetery folks as well.
Yeah, the Sauer Union Cemetery there, and then in the north near Lecompton too.
Right.
I would say, I think we normally do a press release each year and promote it on our social media as well and include it in our newsletter. So I think we do some general outreach as well for it. I think the papers even covered it in the past. And so those are also part of our outreach.
Yeah. And I think it's generally pretty robust, just kind of looking at like what are the unique to the west part of our county that we can get information to.
Yeah, I've really been excited about the cemetery projects. I think there was 2 funded last year and then the one in Lecompton the year before. So I feel like we see a little bit of trends pop up through the grant cycle of we'll get different types of projects that'll come through, over a couple of years. So I think we've been funding a few more cemetery projects recently. All righty. And so thinking about, similar to the grant program and how we support heritage work, one of the pieces that had come up kind of since I started here at the county and working with the HCC was understanding how we support heritage initiatives beyond the grant program and also beyond the existing funding through the community partner process of the budget to the heritage or the historical societies and museums in the county. And so with the 2025 budget this year, we have repurposed some of our existing Heritage Conservation Office allocation that was in the past used to cover professional services for those historic resource surveys and kind of grew over time to support that contract work. And so we're doing less of that work. And so we repurposed some of that funding to help create this new pool of funds to be able to support annual cultural events and celebrations. And so I'm really excited about the potential here. I think it solves a couple of tricky, not problems, but opportunities to support this work further in thinking about heritage and living heritage and how we see that. And so this takes some burden off of the grant program, having this separate pool of funding. For instance, I think one of the main cases for setting this up was their work with Somos Lawrence and their Day of the Dead and Day of the Spring celebrations they host each year. Just really proven to be really fantastic events, not only the day of, but these events, I think for all of us on HCC is really proven that, while the events are a single day events, they really are felt throughout the community beyond that day. And so thinking of how we can support that work in a stronger way in the future where they don't have to go through the administrative burden of reapplying for the grant every single year and finding that in-between space. And also to support work like the Vinland Fair funding that was moved into this space as well. So I think what we're really visioning is a process similar to the community partner funding process, but that is tailored to meet the needs of these smaller organizations. And so we're working now to develop the framework of that program and meeting with folks to see how that works on the finance end and how we can create a program. I think our idea would be to create a program that's, I would be hesitant to make a program that's another grant program where it's just as competitive, but so I think it would mirror the community partner funding process, but again, tailored to kind of meet the needs of the folks in this space.
So are most of those events kind of already identified and already have a relationship with the county, or are there others? So I know like Juneteenth has come to us directly as a commission, and this is maybe a better process for that. But do we have capacity in that we're kind of saying we are open to events, or are they mostly identified?
I think they, in between that, so I don't know if we have it all the way identified yet. I think there might be a way to kind of, if we have extra funds, but I think it basically we have several already identified, and then that could be added to in the future if needed. But I think that's where we're at right now, is determining, if we already have folks identified, but kind of creating the framework and seeing, what exists out there currently and what could be added if needed.
Is it intended that this is separate from all of our heritage partners that we already fund through our general fund? Because I know that they also have events that would be one-time cultural events or annual cultural events that could kind of otherwise fit under that. But is that intended to, would those be eligible to apply under it, or is that a thought process that's been had yet?
I think this is, my understanding is this is intended to be separate from that, so a way to support organizations outside of that process. Yes, I think it's a separate pool of funding. One of the things I know HCC has talked about too, and we'll jump into this as we talk more about the Heritage Partner funding, but a way to support, smaller groups that might have a smaller scope that might not be the best fit for the community partner type funding, but could still benefit from annual support. And this is really sort of how our idea for how to get there. Sweet. Okay. But yeah, so we'll be back probably before the end of the year with that sort of framework, or around the start of the year, for how we can, with our ideas for how to allocate those funds. Alrighty, so the Heritage Partner funding, so this is a piece, so the county supports cultural heritage organizations through the community partner process of the budget. I think I've said that a couple of times here, but this has always been a bit separate to HCC. and just the heritage support. But I think we're kind of understanding, and discussions with HCC has really been to better understand how this funding was awarded and how we can continue to ensure the sustainability of these heritage groups. The county has a fairly strong investment in these groups. That's the sort of total there, but each organization is funded at a different level. But this has been something that the county has invested in through the support of the heritage partners. And so you can see the list there of the different historical societies that we support. I will add at the end there recently since COVID, there has been a lot more collaboration among the heritage partners, which I think has been really successful. And I think we're really headed somewhere exciting because of this collaboration. And I think it really presents an opportunity, which is kind of this next big project here. To better understand this sort of community of historical societies that we have here in Douglas County, and better inform us at the county how we can, play a role in facilitating this space of all the different historical societies and what our role should be, and what HCC's role should be in this as well. And again, what then the role of the organizations themselves. So in working in some initial discussions with the heritage partners, I think there's a real need to understand, it's kind of two parts to this project. So understanding the current needs and strengths of the organizations. There really hasn't been a bird's eye view look at all of the organizations as a whole. And so this plan and working with an outside consultant who has fresh eyes on the space to help define those strengths and existing needs, and then using that sort of bird's eye perspective to inform a more formal collaborative model for how that more clearly defines what the county's role is and what others' roles are here in the county. So I think there, like I mentioned, with the collaborative support and collective nature of folks starting to work together more, there's a real need to define those roles, especially if there is to be further investment or more support from the county's end. Understanding how to do that and how to do that equitably is a real challenge. So I think this is a great first step to kind of that challenge moving forward. And also, I think a big piece of this is, defining that model and offering those short and long-term action recommendations of how to increase equity there. Another piece too that I think I've heard a lot from HCC moving, through this and trying to better understand, these allocations. Is just how these groups got to the table. And, if we're going through this work, building in a way for, other folks to, join the coalition too, or, creating an entryway and more transparency into what we're supporting and how that work's being accomplished. So do you want to add in anything there?
Yeah, just to further some of the things Caitlin said about trying to find the strengths of each of these groups. Some of these groups are primarily, I don't want staffed, I guess is the right term, or they're dependable or depending on volunteer hours and volunteer works. And that's unequal among a bunch of the groups. Some of the groups own property. Some of the groups host events regularly. And with that sort of varying strengths and weaknesses, property, resources, all of that could just change with, some event happening, say a volunteer can't do something, or someone in the board passes away. It completely could shift some of these groups. And I think this would be helpful, not only for us to understand their needs, but also for them to understand some of their needs as well. Because some of these groups have been operating because they're family, friends, community members have been doing these things for years and don't really have a sustainability plan.
And I wonder if storage can be part of that conversation too, because you talk about, friends, family, community members, even, storing parts of those museum collections because there's no place else to put it. Could be at private property, could be, in places that aren't as secured as they should be for the long-term health of the artifacts. So yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of players in these spheres, but definitely want to be able to support them all and support them all well.
Right. And I think saying the storage, yeah, one of the things that, Watkins is helping with and is, they're working on their own inventory and sort of thing. And it sort of makes some of the other groups realize as well that, so like Santa Fe Trail, they don't have a museum. They have artifacts spread throughout in different locations. Some of those locations they don't even own. Blackjack has a similar scenario where their artifacts, might be housed at Baker University, might be at the property, and they may not have a clear record or proper inventory of any of these things. And so I think collaboration, especially with help from some of the other groups, might actually help store, but also do inventory about all of these things.
This is Commissioner Kelly. Can I ask a question real quick? Thanks for, I'm curious, like each day we have more and more historic and cultural assets. Is there best practice when it comes to evaluating, is there a threshold? Like, how do we, it would seem like we would never have enough resources to cover preserving all historical and cultural assets. Is that talked about at all in this space? And maybe if so, what is talked about?
I think that a piece of this definitely will be some sort of prioritization. I think that's definitely the key. I think that is shared, among both natural and cultural heritage spaces is, there's always going to be, land you'd like to see restored back to prairie or, artifacts on a shelf that aren't inventoried. So I think probably a big piece of this is that prioritization and setting those goals. Because right now we're operating without that. So if we even have, a bit of a perspective on where we're headed in the next, 5 years, that can help with that piece of understanding what's most important, where can we best allocate our resources, how can we, share those resources to do the most good. So that's an excellent question because, being in this space is, there's always going to be more work that's to be done. So, but I am heartened by the collaboration and sort of taking this bird's eye perspective to set those priorities.
And thank you to Commissioner Kelly for jumping in. I did not see when you jumped on. Thank you for being here.
I'm just reminded of the quote that my father tells me, history is made every day. So there we go.
Yes, and it's a beautiful thing, but also a little overwhelming at times. But anyway, okay. So that I think that Heritage Partner Study is going to take up the better part of our time through the end of the year. But I'm really excited about that project. But moving in now, sort of the next major project. This has been the Countywide Archaeological Survey. This project has been in development since 2022. My predecessor kind of got this off the ground, but it kind of went a bit stagnant for a little bit as, I got into this role and managing other projects. But with the sort of work in the open space. I think that having a better understanding of our archaeological resources will connect to some of the other work we're planning to do. And so we have been working to revive this project and keep it moving along. We've got a draft of the RFP completed, and now we're just working to share that with partners. But this archaeological survey will be a fairly, Nick, our archaeologist, could explain more about how this works, but it's essentially a phase one, which is a background research report that will update our previous countywide archaeological survey that was completed, I think, in 1996. So updating that work, and then it'll have a piece of a couple of phase two investigations, which is essentially a not terribly invasive walking survey of certain specific areas to kind of ground check some previous survey areas, and that would be determined after the phase one of working with a consultant. But yes, so this is moving forward. It currently has funding that was approved by you all again in 2022, utilizing our reserve funding. So that's our current plan moving forward. But Nick, do you have anything to add here on this? I think that's
I mean, not really. You pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, the main thing is kind of like Caitlin was saying, that when we first were talking about updating the survey from 96, it was like, oh, we're gonna just do the whole county. And I think with the open space plan, it actually kind of like our overall strategic plan, it gives us some direction and sort of gives us a place of focus. Instead of just saying, we're going to do this whole thing over this whole county, and it just seemed a little too big.
And here, I won't dive too much in because we've talked a lot about the open space plan through other ways, but HCC has been involved in the development of the plan that was adopted in April of this year. Patty and one of our previous HCC members, Mike Delaney, served on the advisory committee. So heritage has been woven into this plan itself, and I think it does provide a sort of guiding framework for how HCC could be used in the future. And again, staff is supporting this work. I think this is really going into that advisory role and more collaboration. The work on this project has really integrated work among, sustainability, zoning codes, and heritage. And I think we're all working together really well and for the benefit of all. And so just understanding, as open space initiatives grow in the future or, transform through time, that I think HCC is excited about the possibilities there, and seeing, if there's ever a need there, I think HCC has been excited about the possibilities there. But yeah. And then just the final piece here, we've kind of stepped away from doing public programs ourselves, but we do have an event coming up at the start of November that will get all the pieces together here, hopefully this week, we're hosting Douglas County Barn Fest. So this is a project that was in development. I think it was canceled in 2020, or it's been in development for a while. It was supposed to be a strong partnership with the Kansas Barn Alliance. They had to step back from hosting the event themselves, so we've kind of taken it on. We've got some funding through the State Historic Preservation Office, that Historic Preservation Fund, to do this work, and so we'll be hosting a full day of workshops and then followed by a barn tour of barns around the county. But yeah, all that information is coming together now. It should be up soon for folks to register. There'll be a free event, and so we're excited to host this. This is really a strong collaboration with one of our HCC members, Amy Vandereet, and she has served on the council for almost her full 6 years now. She'll be off at May next year, but this is really kind of her baby here, and sort of honoring a lot of the historic preservation work that we've done. So yeah, she's been a great help in kind of getting this project going, and yeah, so we're excited to host this in Lecompton in November. But yeah.
Looks like a lot of fun.
Yes. But yeah, so that's essentially all that we had for you all. That's, I think, all of our projects carrying us into next year. I think we're all really excited about the direction we're headed, the sort of mix of all the different types of projects. And yeah, we're happy to answer any questions you might have or anything like that. Yes.
And commissioners, do you want to start with any questions?
This is Commissioner Reed. I've got a couple questions. Thank you for that overview. It's always exciting to see the update, and I have been curious how implementing the strategic plan has sort of felt and figuring out what that means in sort of tangible next steps. So thanks for giving us some concrete project plans. I'm just I have some more broad questions about HCC. One, I'm just curious, does the number in the group feel like a good working productive number? I know that's sort of like maybe something you discussed a little bit in the strategic plan, but I'm just curious to get a temperature reading from like group leadership about how that number has been in terms of thinking about this new direction and the way that you will focus energies moving forward.
I can say that there has been discussion about trying to expand, and part of that discussion was related to trying to find countywide representation, as well as trying to find actual preservation experts, as well as trying to add diversity to the board. And so we have in the past talked about trying to implement or find more committee members. But we haven't really discussed that recently. And oddly enough, when we're trying to find a new member, we actually haven't really talked about that. But we luckily, our newest natural sort of heritage member is in sort of the southwest part of the county. So it sort of helped in some ways, but I don't know. Have we talked really recently about any of these?
No, I think we've mostly put it on pause just as we fill the current vacancies and sort of there. I think, there was a lot of discussion, and I think we have some good ideas if we ever need to or feel a strong need to expand the council in the future. I think we've got some solid ideas that have been developed, but I think with open space in particular and understanding how the implementation of that will go in the longer term, I think really putting this on expansion of the council on pause for now before understanding if there is a need. But I think it's pretty functional as it is currently. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd also comment that when we were doing a lot more it was a heavy workload for 7. Now we've stepped back from that a lot of that hands-on work. I feel like the lift is less than it once was. Still very stimulating and all kinds of work to do, but yeah, more manageable.
Cool. Thanks, Patty. Yeah, that helps. I was curious about just sort of that, I guess, change of pace and the nature of how the group has been focused. And, I really just asked the question I think it's something to keep thinking through as you go through this sort of coming few seasons of bringing these projects to fruition and really settling into a different sort of approach or a refocusing, is to consider what if that number needs revisiting, and not because I have any preconceived notions about it, just out of curiosity and an opportunity to sort of assess if it feels like it's productive. And I recognize it's always a weird question to ask when we struggle with vacancies here sometimes, right? And that's part of the equation, is determining how possible it is to, recruit a wide variety of perspectives to share the workload. But just something I was curious to get a temperature reading on. And then also, I know that sort of the nature of HCC is, and especially with this focus on a needs assessment and strategic plan related to all our historic partners, I'm curious about what if any conversations or relationship building has happened, like specifically with the Freedom's Frontier National Historic Area, and then like other tourism, which some of those historic partners are natural tourist destinations or natural tourist draws to the community. And so they may have their own sort of connections, but I suppose I want to mention that as part of that sort of needs assessment and inventory, assessing what those connection points and strengths are with like Explore Lawrence or the Baldwin and Eudora chambers or visitor and bureau centers that are doing their own sort of marketing of Douglas County attractions. And a strong part of our identity is natural and heritage and cultural conservation. So I'd be interested to hear more about that through line, if it's been a part of the conversation about how to amplify that strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's something that's definitely come up in our initial conversations and thinking about working, more formally together. I think we have a really great opportunity to practice this coming up in 2026 with the World Cup and the 250th anniversary of the country, which I can never remember the word, and I don't want to embarrass myself here. But I think we have a real opportunity with those events to put this into practice then. I think in thinking about, I think a lot has aligned really well with this work because we can start to think about that collaboration. And I believe that the Douglas County Historical Society is already working on collaborative grant applications amongst the Heritage Partners to do that tourism connection work related to the 250th anniversary. So I think we're really well timed to be able to have these events to practice and put this into practice, and that's all related to that tourism piece. And it's a great question, and I think we're well timed to be embarking on this work.
Cool. I love the energy behind that answer, and I think you're thinking along the same lines I am, and how those opportunities are really rich in terms of promoting what's unique about our community and what's really special about our community, and just the like benefit of our amazing GIS department and that story map that's been created and the other story maps that have been created. Like, I just think there's a lot of opportunities in front of us to think through how does that integrate with an app, for example, and of people who are doing self-guided tours in addition to special events and sort of curated opportunities. So, and then my last question is, I appreciate that accessibility is sort of named and as a core goal in the strategic plan. I'm curious if, and it might be in the strategic plan that was adopted if I went and reminded myself verbatim, but what's sort of our working definition of how we're thinking about accessibility, especially when we talk about the fact that some of these are physical sites and singular entities that are owned, and then some are not owned and therefore and also spread out or maybe event focused. So can you help me understand how you guys are defining that?
That is such a fantastic question, and I think we've had really wonderful discussions about that. I think that is something that HCC talks about a lot, is that balance in accessibility. I think this could be applied to any sort of corner of our work on the natural side, balancing the sensitive ecosystems with getting folks out into nature. And this comes up a lot in, grant review and determining what that accessibility looks like. I don't know, I feel like I could ramble on about this for a while, but essentially that is something that is top of mind and sort of our working space, at least as far as the grants go, and some of our other work is thinking broadly about the public benefit of the work. That might not always be boots on the ground, access, but if they can have access to the information, online through other means, or, in times where, the cultural information might be sensitive, like with archaeological resources, but finding a way to still, let folks know that information, is out there, and, we're using it to do better or good things in the community. So I don't know if either of you have anything to add, but that is definitely something we talk about a lot as a group.
Yeah, I mean, mainly comes out in a lot of our conversations about grants. Sometimes some of the grant applications, they haven't taken ideas of accessibility under account. And so a lot of times we'll remind them or try to, help them think about, oh, you're going to put up signage, make sure it's a certain size and that it's, readable for other groups. And we've even, had our own sort of sessions where when we did the National Natural Landmark Tour, we hired someone to come in to talk about DEI and accessibility issues, and we invited some of the tour sites, the sort of stakeholders of the tour sites to come and have these conversations about accessibility as well. So, yeah, we've done quite a bit of work, I think, on this, and we can always do more.
I appreciate that. I think, I'm just excited to see that it's named and really prioritized, because I think you all just highlighted just a handful of ways to think about the idea of accessibility, and that it really does look different and means different things depending on the context of the situation. And so, thinking about it through grant applications is one piece of it, but also now that, you're embarking on this assessment again of sort of all of the organizations with sites and or events, thinking about how do we inventory and define what does accessibility mean in those places, whether we're talking about ADA accessibility and those things, or we're talking about public access versus, restricted access. I just think thinking through how we define that, and maybe even how to sort of quickly label or spot for the public what type of access they might have, right? Whether it is, or what, even being able to name if there are some mobility difficulties, for example, or thinking through, like the way that hikes are sometimes listed, like low, moderate, high, intensity, those types of things about how to just communicate more easily to the public that are interested in these things, whether it's going to be easy for them to plan for.
Commissioner Kelly, did you have questions?
I'm not sure I have more questions, maybe just comments. Commissioner Reed hit on one of mine about, making sure we have representation, and it seems like geographical representation has been considered. And that's really great to hear. But, I just want to encourage the HCC to continue to test their assumptions on how to engage with other people, who are the other groups that we need to engage with, and maybe not limit ourselves to those who have expertise in preservation, but maybe groups that maybe might not want so much preservation, and just so that we have that perspective. I really think that I want to thank staff and the volunteers and also our heritage partners for all their work. They have made a lot of progress over the last few years on this. And maybe this is a question, like, we've got this list of heritage partners. How do you get added to the list? Has there been thoughts on that? Like how do you get excluded from the list? Maybe that's the question we should really ask. But, has there been any thought put to that? And if so, what?
That's a great question, and that's I think one of the questions we hope to address with that strategic planning or goal setting. I think that is something that's been identified is that list, and that's been a big discussion among HCC of, how did these folks get brought to the table, and who's missing, and how do we expand that work. So that's a great question, and one we definitely hope to address moving forward.
Thanks.
Just have a couple of questions, and I think mostly you've answered them, so that's pretty super. The tours and the conferences and things like that the group has organized in the past, I think, have had tremendous value, especially because not all of the work is the grant program has gone to support our public property. Some of those are private property, and so like having some some kind of public access, even if public access is not the main goal, seems to be, I think, a value that if there's no access for the public, what is the other benefit, and just communicating what that benefit would be. But it sounds like the tours and conferences will still exist. They just will be not entirely under your purview, that you're supporting other partners in doing that, because I think they've been really meaningful for the community.
Yeah, that's definitely the direction we hope to move in is supporting, other groups, at least to assist in that work. I think we just found, or the HCC found, that it was too much to just do it ourselves. But yes, supporting other folks doing that work, because we still have our certified local government status and can still access those funds. So we can definitely, be a pass-through entity in a way to, have access to that funding and help support folks, doing that work in the community.
And just a real review, the certified local government status is part of what defines who has to sit on that board, right? So some of those positions are limited because that is what gives us access to the state grant funds. Would that be right?
That's correct.
Okay, so one of the ideas of if we're adding more voices, adding new voices would also be adding more seats in order to have those spots also.
Yes, and that's where some of the creative ideas that have come up in discussion of expanding the council, there might be a way to break off the CLG entity into its own piece and have the council be another piece, but I don't want to get too into the weeds. But there's some creative ideas for how we can kind of navigate that if we ever wanted to expand.
Well, I interact with the work of this group through a variety of partners and have greatly valued it. So I feel like I had some of my questions answered before I started here. But I think Commissioner Kelly's point of engaging with the voices that don't yet value this or don't value this, and seeing like what pieces of it have kind of universal acceptance and what pieces less so, I just think is always a culturally important, community important piece of the puzzle. But I don't have any more questions. Commissioners, do you have any more questions or thoughts you'd like to share? Thank you so much for being here, and it's always fun to hear about these, and I think this is something that I'm personally pretty proud of, though I have a very small role in this. So thank you for being here, and I would just remind again, if anyone has comments that they would like to share with us based on what they've heard, they can certainly contact us through email or any other way, but you can stay for our 5:30 business meeting and give public comment at that time too. So thank you all, and for that we are recessed until 5:30. Thank you.